Hey everyone, it's Samantha. I want to kind of give you a little bit of a life update before I get started on this video. It's been kind of a rough day for me today, which is why I'm wanting to film, because this is something that makes me feel better. Is just kind of talking about books. If you don't know, I work in the mental health field, so I work with people who have severe and or persistent mental illnesses and just try to get them on track with their life. And so, as you probably already know, that means listening to a lot of really heartbreaking stories and experiencing a lot of really strong, powerful emotions. And a lot of times I go through those emotions as well, especially the more similar the circumstance, the more likely I'm going to go through those emotions. So that kind of happened a little bit today, and so I'm just trying to get out of the funk. So if I seem a little bit different today, that's probably why. But anyway, let's get into the video. Something that a friend of mine mentioned to me, she is like due any day now. Actually, she was due like last week. If you're watching, Amelia, hi, you're featured in this video. But she was talking to me about my channel, and she's like, oh, I just really want to read some of the books that you're recommending, but I just am not going to have time. It would be nice if there were some short books that you could recommend. And I'm like, oh, you know what? That's a really good idea. So I went to the library as well. We already talked about that pile. Ignore that one. But I got a whole stack of short books for me to work through and see if there are any that I recommend. Most of these are coming from the library. A couple are books that I already own and just haven't read yet, but I don't have very many short books, so that's why a lot of them are coming from the library. First book I'm going to talk about is Pen Pal by Dathan, not Nathan, Dathan Auerbach. And I only know that this is supposed to be like horror genre. According to the back cover, in an attempt to make sense of his own mysterious and unsettling childhood memories, a man begins to reconstruct his past. As the games and adventures of his youth become engulfed by a larger story, he finds that it forms a tapestry of unbelievable horror that he never could have expected. Each chapter completes a different piece of the puzzle for both you and the narrator, and by the end of it all, you will wish that you could forget what he never knew. Does that not sound good or what? I've heard really good things about this book, and it's not so well known, so I'm actually really looking forward to reading this. This is a book that I own that's been on my shelf for probably almost a year, not quite, but I have been wanting to get to it, and I think this is the perfect time to do it. The next series that I'm going to talk about, it's 3 books that I'm planning on reading. 2 of them are going to be rereads, and that's the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire. Yeah, I think Shannon. I'm probably wrong, but my head's all messed up. So I've read Down Among the Sticks and Bones. When I first read this, I gave it 5 stars. I really love this book. And then the 3rd book is Beneath the Sugar Sky, which I remember giving this 4 stars. I didn't love it as much as the second one. And then the first book is Every Heart a Doorway, but I already read this one this year. It's definitely a good book. The reason why I like Down Among the Sticks and Bones so much is because it's a really dark atmosphere, and this is the world that I was the most interested in seeing. So I'm excited about jumping into this one again. And then I'm purely reading this one just because it's going to be the next book in the series. But I haven't read In an Absent Dream yet, which is book number 4. I pre-ordered it and haven't read it yet. But I will, because I mean, it's short and there's no reason not to. I've heard kind of mixed things about this. I've heard people that they just didn't care about this world and so they weren't as invested in it. But I mean, I'm keeping an open mind. We'll see what happens. The next 4 books I'm not going to go into detail because I've already talked about them already, but that is books 1 through 3 of the Fear Street saga. In case you want to know the titles, the first one is called The Betrayal, the second is The Secret, and the third one is The Burning. They're short and sweet, and I'm looking forward to getting to them. And then next book is Revenge by Yoko Ogawa. I already talked a little bit about this book. and I'm also excited to get into this. Next book on my list is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. I've heard about this book and I've heard that it's really good. I honestly don't know much about it. Back cover doesn't really give much either, but obviously it's won awards, so it's got to be good. And when I picked it up, it's got some artwork in it, so that kind of drew me to it. I like how it's really dark. The next book I'm going to be talking about is actually one that I've seen before, but I just never gravitated towards it, but a coworker of mine highly recommended it, and so I'm kind of reconsidering picking it up, and that is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. From what I understand, it seems to be a book about mental health and mental illness, so I'm curious about that part of it, but I'm also a little worried because I've also read The Catcher in the Rye and hated that book. Although that was years ago, I've had people tell me like you should definitely reconsider, you should try rereading it, but I don't know. So I'm a little hesitant about reading this just because I've got that preconception in my mind that it's going to be similar. But I mean, I definitely could be wrong. So I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to try and go in without any bias towards it and just go in with an open mind, and we'll see what happens. The next book, I've only seen it a couple of times, but I guess there's some controversy around it. But I mean, it sounds interesting to me. I just never thought that I was going to find it on my shelf. And it's a small book. It's a small book, and then it's like also page-wise small. And that is My Sister, the Serial Killer. I'm going to have to look up how to pronounce her name. By Onika Braithwaite. Again, I don't really know much about this book, but I've heard that it says a darkly comic hand grenade of a novel about a Nigerian woman whose younger sister has a very inconvenient habit of killing her boyfriends. It just sounds like it's a really dark take on serial killers, and that's supposed to be a little on the funny side. So I'm curious. I'm going in with a really open mind about this one too. It has been on my radar and I'm very curious about it. So I was happy to see that it's a short book. This next book I completely picked up on a whim. With a lot of these books that I saw from the library, I was literally just scanning the shelves on what was small and kind of caught my eye. And this was definitely one of those books. And that is You Were Never Really Here by Jonathan Ames. I know nothing about the movie, never heard of it. It's extremely thin, and basically what I get from it is that there's this guy who used to be a FBI agent, and then he gets kind of wound up in some conspiracy theories going on, and a whole bunch of people are chasing after him. I know it sounds a little generic, but for some reason, it sounded good to me at the time, and it still sounds good. I think my curiosity is also piqued just by the fact that it's so thin. I think what happens is when it comes to these kinds of thrillers where people are getting chased and whatnot, the books are like super thick, like Lee Child. I read the first book of Lee Child, and I liked Jack Reacher. I liked it, but I felt like it was just really long. So the fact that this is so small, I feel like it's going to be jam-packed with action because it doesn't have many pages to tell it. So I'll let you know on that. Another book that I just saw browsing on the shelves, Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin, it looks like. Another one, it just kind of caught my eye, especially it said Fever Dream. Based on the inside cover, it says, Fever Dream is a nightmare come to life. A ghost story for the real world, a love story and a cautionary tale. Samantha Schweblin creates an aura of strange psychological menace and otherworldly reality in this absorbing, taut, unsettling novel. That really piqued my interest. And I just realized it's not Samantha, it's Samantha. No H. I just assumed, because my name's Samantha, I assumed this was Samantha, but then I noticed when I was reading this, it says Samantha. Huh. interesting. It just sounded really intriguing to me. It sounds like it's going to be definitely a surreal experience. I like the idea that it keeps on saying like haunting, ghost story. So I'm assuming it's going to have some creepy, unsettling vibes. Not necessarily like a real ghost story by any means, but I'm really curious to see what this is going to deliver. And again, like, it's going to be so easy to read. It's going to be a really quick read. Again, I haven't talked about this one, but I mean, you'll understand why I don't go into detail about it. It's Fear Street Cheerleaders, The Third Evil. I managed to get the second Evil on ebook from my library, so it worked out. Thankfully, I didn't have to go through that whole thing with the reference book, but I just picked up The Third Evil since I got the second Evil on ebook. The last book that I'm going to be talking about is also another friend recommendation. It's actually his favorite book of all time, and he highly recommended it to me, and plus it's a really short book, and I'm like, you know what? Why not? And that is Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. I had no idea what this book was about. It's just exploring what life is and his travels towards finding a meaning of life. And apparently this is a classic book. It's very highly based in Buddhism. Kind of talks about, I believe, the origin of Buddha, just kind of meeting the original Buddha. I honestly don't know much context into it or the significance of this book, but I'm already halfway through, as you can see, and I'm really enjoying it, honestly. It's bringing up a lot of philosophical questions for me about what it is that we try to gain in life. What are the things that really give our lives meaning and purpose, and how people find that meaning in different ways. So I'm really enjoying this book. I'm going to let you know how I feel about it when I get to the end. But by reading this book, and then also I have a couple of coworkers who practice different religions than I do myself, it's really helped me open my eyes to just how different the world is and all the cultures that I'm exposed to. And I feel like it's more my responsibility to learn more about the cultures and religions that my coworkers and clients that I work with, where they come from, so I can better understand what they're having problems with. It's kind of like the Bible in that, I mean, this is going to be super controversial, but I interpret the Bible as some parts of it are like true and actually happen, and then there's other parts that are just hyperbole or are parables, as they say in the book, where it's not necessarily a scenario that has happened, but it's teaching a life story. And this is definitely an example of teaching a life story, at least in my viewpoint. Maybe for Buddhists, this is something that actually did happen in their religion. You know, like, I didn't realize I was going to be talking this deep into this book. I read it as a life story to help you learn more about yourself and grow as a person. So I'm enjoying this from my point of view. I'm very curious to see if you guys have read any of these books. There's quite a lot of them, I know, but I'm kind of thinking that I could do like a book a day. Like when I get home, read a book and then call it done. So if there's a certain book that I mentioned here where you're like, oh, get to this first, let me know. Or if there's a book where you're like, oh yeah, maybe wait a little bit on that, let me know too. I'm very interested to hear your comments down below. And until next time, I'll see you later.